Welcome to Virtual Views at the Norton Museum of Art. I am Laurie Barnes, Elizabeth B. McGraw Curator of Chinese Art. Art and birds, particularly those that migrate, are bridges between people of different cultures. The kings of birds in Chinese art are the imaginary phoenix and fierce birds of prey in the natural world, such as owls depicted on Chinese works of art in the collection of the Norton that were created about 3,000 years ago. This program connects these early works of art and a painting titled "The Phoenix Calling the Morning Sun" with birds that can be seen in South Florida. The painting, on loan from the collection of John and Heidi Niblack, is believed to have been created in the 1500s. In this painting, the phoenix represents a brave Chinese official calling to the emperor to rectify injustice, a song that resonates in our nation and world today. The phoenix is surrounded by birds, collectively symbolizing the whole world. Certain birds also represent the 5 Confucian relationships: ruler to ruled, the phoenix; father to son, cranes; husband to wife, mandarin ducks; elder brother to younger brother, wagtails; and friend to friend, Chinese orioles. It is my personal hope that this presentation will resonate with you on a profound level and act as your call to be an agent of courage, cooperation, and social consciousness in our world today. Now I would like to introduce Benji Stu, Public Program Supervisor with the Department of Environmental Resources Management and Conservation Photographer, who will take us to the garden and introduce us to some of the birds that can be found in South Florida. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you will enjoy the program.
Laurie, thank you so much for that introduction and for inviting me here to be with you. It's such a treat for me to come and learn about this incredible piece of artwork from you, and also to talk about one of my favorite things, and that is the birds of South Florida here. So if you're ready, you want to go in the garden and see what we found? Okay. So we've made it out to the sculpture garden here, and like Laurie said inside, we're here to talk about native birds today. And what I love about native birds is they really, and birds in general, is they really have this ability to kind of transcend these geopolitical lines and cultural boundaries that we kind of create as humans. Since we've been around, we have held birds in reverence, we've worshiped birds, and we've admired their beauty. And so, you know, creating a garden space in your own home, like the one here at the Norton, is such an incredible way to bring birds into your life and your home, and actually provide them with some essential habitat that they need on these journeys, these migrations that we talked about inside. You know, that's the whole thing, is birds don't understand these boundaries, and there's so many species that help us bring cultures together because different parts of the world see the same birds. There are birds like the bar-tailed godwit, the longest nonstop migrant in the world, flies 7,000 miles in one shot and only takes it 7 to 11 days to complete. And those birds are flying nonstop from places like Alaska and northern Russia all the way down to Australia and New Zealand, and so obviously they're experiencing these different cultures in these different lands, and I feel like that's one of the ways that birds can bring us together, just like art. And so I want to talk to you all a little bit about some of those migrants that I saw here in the garden just a few days ago when I visited with my camera. Some of these birds are these incredibly charismatic, tiny little songbirds, these warbler species. I hear some birds even right now in the garden. The migration is kind of wrapping up. We're in May here, it's getting pretty hot. But when I was here a few days ago, it was kind of in full swing. And we were so lucky to see some of these warblers moving through in this mixed flock. The black and white warbler is one of these birds. It's this tiny little dramatically colored black and white bird that creeps along branches. And a black-throated blue warbler is another one that we saw here in the garden. Just dramatically colored, this slate gray, blue on their back and black along their throat. The American redstart is another one that we saw here. And those birds are kind of famous for flashing these reds and yellows that are on their wings and their tails. And what they'll do is perch on these branches and they'll swoop down and catch insects and come right back up. And so all these different species of birds have these different kind of behaviors and telltale kind of giveaways, which is something that you can really get into when you get into birding. But what's amazing about these birds is they weigh less than a Sharpie marker, and yet they're traveling thousands and thousands of miles every single year between their breeding grounds and their wintering grounds. The Cape May Warbler is another example of one of these extreme migrants. So again, this is a tiny little warbler, yellow and beautiful rusty red on its face. And this is a bird that winters in Central and South America. But to breed in the summer, it travels thousands and thousands of miles all the way up to the boreal forests of Canada. And this is one of those examples that makes birding really special to me, because it kind of tells us that even though technology is amazing here in 2021, there's so much left to learn. So the Cape May Warbler is this species that we really know very little about their breeding habits and also their courtship. All these birds have these different little courtship dances that they do. But Cape May Warblers, again, they go all the way up into these deep conifer forests in the boreal forests of Canada. And they build these tiny little nests 40 to 50 feet up in the canopy of trees, these really inaccessible places. So again, I am so in awe of these tiny little creatures and their charismatic colors. And we get to experience these birds twice a year as they move through Florida. So here in Florida, one of the things that makes us lucky to live here is that we're on this East Coast flyway. So we're on this migration corridor. All of these, so many species of birds that winter in Central and South America will fly over the Caribbean Sea, and they'll hit the Florida Peninsula, and they'll all move up the peninsula in these groups. And oftentimes in the springtime and in the fall, when we get these cold fronts that come through, it'll do what's called a fallout event. And so these birds, when they hit that strong north wind that is preventing them from moving north, they'll kind of settle out into these refuges and places just like the sculpture garden here and the native plant garden that they've created. So they need these places to take cover while they're waiting for that wind to shift so that they can continue going north. And the other thing that these amazing native places give these tiny little birds is refuge and areas where they can forage, where they can feed and kind of fuel these tiny little bodies so that they can continue their migration north, these thousands and thousands of miles. So even in this urban habitat where you walk along the street, you see a lot of concrete and a lot of buildings, it doesn't take much to create these spaces that are essential little green islands that can really attract these really charismatic little bird species. So the warblers are one of these migrants that I did want to talk about, but there's so many other birds that we can see year-round just by creating a space like we have here at the Norton. So one of the birds that Lori talked about inside that was revered and worshipped by the ancient Chinese cultures are owls. And an owl species we have here in Florida that has adapted really, really well even to the urban environment is the eastern screech owl. So these are charismatic, tiny little birds, and owls, I like to say, are some of the superheroes of the bird world because they have all of these adaptations that allow them to be these incredibly successful predators. And the screech owl is one of these birds that again has adapted to life in an urban environment as long as you kind of provide what it needs, and that is tree canopy, and also nesting spots. And so normally these are birds of the forest, and they rely on other birds like woodpeckers to excavate these cavities in rotten trees and snags, and they'll use those cavities to nest. But here in the urban environment, we can also put up what's called nest boxes. So you put a nest box up on a tree, it's just a box of wood with a hole in it, and oftentimes you might get an eastern screech owl of your own raising a family right in your yard. So owls again, I call them superheroes of the bird world. They have these incredible adaptations that allow them to be successful predators at night. So one of those is this adaptation that allows them to fly almost completely silent. So the ends of their feathers are adapted so that they foil the wind and completely knock down any sound. So if you all have ever seen one of these, Muscovy ducks, one of these kind of domestic ducks, or the Egyptian geese that are kind of exploding in population here in South Florida, and you've heard them take off, they almost sound like a helicopter. They're moving so much air. But if you're ever lucky enough to see an owl and see an owl fly, you're going to be astonished because you won't hear a thing. And so what that allows these birds to do is really sneak up on their prey and be successful predators. Another thing that owls, one of these adaptations that makes them really successful, is their fixed eyes. So all these owls are kind of adapted to hunt in low light, in darkness. And so the screech owl and all the other owls here that we have in Florida have these fixed eyes, meaning they can't move their eyes independently back and forth like we can. To look left or right, they actually have to move their head. And so owls have this incredibly flexible neck. You and I can turn maybe 90 degrees, maybe a little more than that, from one side to the other. An owl can turn its head 270 degrees, so it can look to the right, but turn all the way around and look left. And what that allows these birds to do is see all around them, but because those eyes are fixed in their skull, it makes them incredibly sensitive to light and able to see in really, really dark environments. Another one of these kind of superpowers. Now, the other thing that you might notice about owls when you look at some of these photos, and we've got some photos of screech owl parents and also chicks. You can tell the chicks because they have these downy, cute little feathers on them. But you'll notice that all these owls have this facial disc. And the facial disc, what I mean by that is the face is a little more flat and the feathers on the side kind of come out. And the reason that that's important for them, it's not just styling how they look, but that facial disc helps to funnel sound into their ears. So again, these birds can fly silently. They can see in almost no light at all. And that facial disc funneling sound to the ears makes them incredibly, incredibly sensitive to sound, meaning that they can lock in on a tiny little lizard or a mouse running around in the dark and really hone in and hunt that prey in almost complete darkness. So another benefit you get if you have owls around your house is they're going to help you get rid of your pests as well. So these are really cool birds, not just to watch and to see, but to kind of help out with your pests around the garden and the house. So another one of these bird species that we have here year-round in Florida is the red-bellied woodpecker. And I saw one of those again the other day when I was in the garden with my camera. It flew up onto this cabbage palm tree, and it was eating these fruits of the palm. These are super charismatic birds. You know when they're around because of their high kind of pitched staccato call. They make themselves known, and they fly in these wing beats and swoops that you can always tell that that's a woodpecker that just flew by. They'll take to nest boxes as well in the urban environment. These critters will eat insects, but they'll also eat some of the fruits on these native plants. A cool adaptation about woodpeckers is obviously these guys are drilling out and excavating little areas in the trunks of trees. But to get that leverage, what woodpeckers have, including the red-bellied woodpecker, you may be able to see it in the photo, is these really stiff tail feathers. And they actually use those tail feathers to prop against the trunk of the tree and give them extra leverage to really drill into that tree, create these holes, and find those insects that they need to feed. And one of the state bird of Florida is the mockingbird. And of course, we had mockingbirds here in the garden. If you have a garden pretty much anywhere in Florida, you're probably going to see a mockingbird now and then. They have these just beautiful calls, this range of sounds that they can create, up to 1,500 different songs they can remember. And they're just really, really interesting birds. They have such personalities. And I had one that was posing really, really close, probably had a nest around in one of those bushes that surround the garden. And so he gave us a really close-up look that you guys can see. One of the birds that, again, going back to art and this relationship with art and birds that we have and that helps, in my view, bring cultures and people together. Lori talked about the cranes in the painting in there in the piece. And one bird that's really, really similar to that we have here is the great egret. So the great egret is one of these iconic symbols of birds in the US. And that's because they're this restoration success story. And if any of you are birders, you probably know about the Audubon Society, this incredible nonprofit that supports bird conservation and brings bird life and the joy of birds to so many people. And the great egret is the logo for the Audubon Society. And so the society was created during this period of extreme pressure on these wading birds like great egrets, because they were being hunted for their plumes. During the breeding season, you'll see in these photos that we have a great egret here that is doing its kind of nest display. And you might be able to see behind the sunset those plumes that are coming off of its back. And around the turn of the century, late 1800s, fancy ladies would love to have these plumes in their hats. And these birds were hunted to near extinction. And the Audubon Society was integral in getting the plume trade stopped, getting plume hunting made illegal, and really one of the main responsible entities for the kind of success story that wading birds are here in the US and how they've come back. Even though these are swamp birds, they're wetland birds, downtown here at the Norton, we're really close to the edge of the Lake Worth Lagoon. And so these birds also inhabit Lake Worth Lagoon, and sometimes even in the urban environment, when you're next to some of these resources, you'll see a great egret in your garden, and they may be hunting lizards in the bushes, and they're so cool because they'll kind of lift their neck up and they'll move back and forth. And what they're doing is really they're sighting in that prey with both of those eyes and getting ready to strike. So another one of these amazing birds that we have here in South Florida and that you can attract by just creating this sheltered space right in your yard like we have right here at the Norton. So I kind of wanted to wrap up today with just one of my personal stories, and as Lori said, I do work for Palm Beach County's Environmental Resources Management, and birds are one of the things that has really helped to connect me to the land. I love them. My wife has come to love them as well. We're always traveling around, and meeting new species is just such a joy. And if you want to do that right here locally, there are so many different areas, not just like the Norton Garden here, but they're called our Palm Beach County natural areas. So Palm Beach County we manage over 31,000 acres of natural areas in the county. They're spread all over the county from Boca up to Tequesta. We even have more than 200 acres preserved at Yamato Scrub Natural Area in the middle of Boca Raton. And these are incredible places that you can go and visit and have your own birding adventure. So please, if you can, support wildlife by planting native plants like the Norton has done here in the Sculpture Garden. Get outside, visit our Palm Beach County natural areas, connect with nature, and start your own bird journey as well. And think about that connection to art and different cultures while you're out there enjoying these amazing, amazing animals. Thank you.